Immersive sim games might be making a comeback. We all know about first-person shooters and RPGs, but what about games that let you solve problems your own way, in a world that reacts to your choices? Those are immersive sims, and for a while they kind of vanished. But with some recently released and upcoming games, the genre might be getting re-established. But why and how? I'll discuss my take not only on the history of immersive sims, but mostly about the games that led to this. Now, if you don't know what immersive sims are, I'm going to explain it in this first section. But if you're not interested in that, you can skip to the next part of the video. I do recommend it for everyone though, you might learn something new. According to Wikipedia, I know, not a very reliable source, but bear with me for a moment. The definition of an immersive sim is a video game genre that emphasizes player choice. They, by definition, allow for multiple approaches, and typically incorporate elements of multiple genres. Well, what does this tell us? A short example. Think away from Call of Duty style scripted events and more towards the open world gameplay mechanics and systems of Dishonored. The immersive sim genre is almost the exact opposite of another genre you might know of, Metroidvania. But unlike that genre, which uses the names of Metroid and Castlevania to give you a sense of what the genre represents, the immersive sim genre doesn't really tell you much. Immersive sims aren't simulation games in a traditional sense, so there's no actual simulation of lifelike activities. You won't be city planning and you won't be in the shoes of a very specific occupation worker. Of course, every immersive sim game varies in how they approach this, but as a broad overview of the genre, they emphasize player choice and game world immersion through a variety of different mechanics. This is mostly done through a combination of genres, like role-playing games, stealth, first-person shooters, platform games and survival horror. The RPG elements bring depth to character development and narrative choices, but the other ones enhance the overall gameplay mechanics. The stealth and first-person shooter aspects offer a world that reacts dynamically to your actions, whether you're sneaking through shadows, hacking a security system, or engaging in a full-blown firefight. This blend of genres is what ensures that no two playthroughs are ever the same. One of the most compelling features of immersive sims is player agency, the freedom to approach problems in multiple ways. Whether you prefer stealth, diplomacy, hacking, or brute force, the game adapts to your choices. Unlike linear games where outcomes are predetermined, immersive sims thrive on unscripted, player-driven events. Every action you take can lead to a chain of unexpected consequences. Maybe you accidentally set off an alarm while hacking a terminal, leading to an escape through a previously unnoticed vent. But even for the AI, it sometimes can get a bit much. Environmental interactivity is another feature of the genre. Most objects can be manipulated and there are many different ways of interacting with NPCs. For example, in the game Dishonored, you can pick up bottles and throw them near enemies so that they get distracted by it. This leads to one of the most appreciated qualities of immersive sims, replayability. You might play stealthily on one run, avoiding confrontations and hacking your way through, while on the next one you might adopt a more aggressive approach, engaging in combat and forging alliances with different factions. This not only switches up the gameplay, but also allows you to experience the narrative from multiple perspectives, discovering new elements of the story and its world. The early 2000s were a golden era for immersive sims, with groundbreaking titles that set the standards and laid the foundation for the genre. Warren Spector is seen as the father of the genre, as he was the director of the original Deus Ex Invisible War, Thief Deadly Shadows and more. While these games are amazing, I will start with Dishonored 1 and 2. These games are known for their supernatural abilities, which allow you to navigate the world in creative ways, whether you are using Blink to teleport across rooftops or Possession to control a rat and slip through a tiny opening. The freedom of movement and approach is unparalleled in the immersive sim genre. The open-ended level design supports this freedom, providing multiple paths and solutions to most objectives. In addition, the games introduce consequences that impact the story and world, forcing you to consider the results of your actions. Depending on how stealthily or aggressive you play, the rat population changes, there are slight differences in dialogues, and there are more or less guards patrolling the area. These games are the book example of immersive sims. Next up is the BioShock series. While they may be considered less of an immersive sim, they still have made a great impact for the genre in my opinion. They have brought immersive sims to a broader audience, with its unique setting and simplified mechanics. Set in the underwater city of Rapture, BioShock combines deep storytelling with an atmospheric environment that draws players in. The game's mechanics, while simpler compared to other immersive sims, still offer a high level of player agency. The plasmid abilities provide various ways to tackle enemies and puzzles, from electrifying water to swarming enemies with insects. This accessibility, coupled with a compelling narrative about power, morality and society, made BioShock a gateway for many into immersive sims. Thief may have had a mixed reception, but its emphasis on stealth mechanics and environmental interaction still showcased key elements of the immersive sim genre. In this reboot of the classic series, players step into the shadows as Garrett, a master thief navigating a dark gothic city. The game emphasizes stealth over combat, encouraging you to use shadows, sound and distractions to outsmart your opponents. The environments are rich with interactive elements, from hidden switches to climbable walls, allowing for multiple approaches to each heist. I do have to note though that the story is kinda mid, and the AI isn't always doing what it's supposed to. But despite its flaws, Thief is still well known in the immersive sim genre. Another game series in the golden age of immersive sims is Deus Ex, particularly Human Revolution and Mankind Divided. These games are recommended for their approach to player choice and complex story. Set in a cyberpunk future, they allow players to navigate the story as Adam Jensen, using a mix of combat, hacking, stealth and social skills. Every mission can be approached in numerous ways, just like the previous games. You can shoot your way through, making use of the cover system, or play it stealthily, with lethal and non-lethal takedowns, moving these bodies and distracting NPCs by hacking things. But what sets these games apart is the depth of the augmented system. These can range from passive enhancements to your vision or damage resistance, to active upgrades, such as allowing you to fall from great heights without injury or increasing your strength. This flexibility extends to the narrative as well, with decisions impacting not just the immediate outcome, but the broader story and world. Prey is another game that stands out in the immersive sim genre, with its interesting setting and gameplay, inspired by System Shock 2. Set aboard the Talos 1 space station, you have to survive by using weapons and collecting resources. The gameplay is similar to Dishonored, and that makes sense, because both games were developed by Arcane Studios. It's a first-person shooter with RPG elements and a strong narrative. Want to transform into a piece of garbage to sneak past enemies? Or perhaps you prefer to hack a door to tackle a different path? Prey encourages such creativity, with a bunch of attributes and weapons at your disposal. The setting of a space station is what really sells this game for me. It's sad to see that this game didn't really get the attention it deserved, and the Mooncrash DLC is highly underrated. As you can see, it's mostly fantasy and sci-fi environments that make up the worlds of immersive sims. I don't know why honestly, a real life setting could also be interesting. While most of these games did reasonably well sales-wise, the whole gaming landscape started to shift, and the immersive sim genre got on a decline. It wasn't because these games weren't appreciated, but because another genre was rising up, action-adventure. Titles like Assassin's Creed, Tomb Raider and Uncharted got players interested with their cinematic storytelling, simpler and faster-paced gameplay and visually stunning worlds. These games offered a more direct and accessible experience compared to the methodical and often complexer mechanics of immersive sims. The emphasis on blockbuster experiences, with scripted sequences and many moments of actions, appealed to a broader audience, which diverted attention and development resources away from immersive sims. And simultaneously there was a dominance of simpler first-person shooters, like Call of Duty and Battlefield. These games drew massive player bases, with their competitive multiplayer modes and fast combat. This rapid-fire gameplay, with dying and immediately getting back in the game, gave people shorter bursts of dopamine, in contrast to the slower pace of immersive sims. This is what I think is the main reason why the genre isn't really appealing to many people anymore, because Gen Z and Alpha is so brainwashed by social media nowadays. As FPS games continue to evolve with advanced graphics, more game modes and expansive online communities, they solidify their place in the gaming industry, making it increasingly difficult for immersive sims to maintain their small place in the market they had left. And it was not only FPS games that were changing, there was a growing trend in general towards more accessible and casual games. Titles like Candy Crush and Angry Birds offered quick rewards and easy to understand gameplay. These are mobile games, but still. Back to real games. The industry's focus shifted towards games that could deliver commercial results and sustained player engagement through multiplayer and live service models. Games like Fortnite and Apex Legends completely overtook the market, with massive successes. Esports were also rising at this time. As a result, many developers and publishers stayed away from the riskier, more niche immersive sim projects, leading to a decline in both the number and prominence of these games. They just don't lend itself as easily to these monetization strategies. Besides, immersive sims had high development costs, because of the extensive gameplay mechanics, complex AI and different narratives of the story. This level of depth required longer development cycles and more personnel in general, just while the industry was shifting more towards more frequent releases, like a yearly new Call of Duty and FIFA. Then Cyberpunk 2077 was announced. It promised a deep single-player experience with player freedom in a lot of aspects. This sounded like it had many elements of an immersive sim. The anticipation was massive, driven by CD Projekt Red's reputation earned from the Witcher series and the game's ambitious promises. Trailers and previews showcased a highly detailed city full of life, with immersive storytelling and interactions. However, the launch did not go as planned. The release was plagued by technical issues and bugs, particularly on older consoles, which led to huge disappointment. The player base therefore dropped significantly after just a few weeks. Despite these setbacks, the core of the game was really solid. Beneath the technical flaws lay a rich, complex world with an interesting storyline and characters. You have multiple ways to approach missions, and a dynamic narrative with dialogue choices. These are all core principles of immersive sims. CD Projekt Red also saw the potential, and promised patches and fixes to restore the game's intended vision. And man, they delivered. Improved the game, and over time, player reception began to shift. The game's ability to support diverse playstyles and meaningful choices showcased the genre's potential, gaining interest again in single-player experiences that offer depth and complexity. I believe that Cyberpunk 2077 played an important role in the rebirth of the immersive sim genre. By far not the only reason, but still a significant one. It reminded the industry that despite the industry's focus on multiplayer and casual gaming, there remains a substantial audience that's interested in complexer player-driven experiences. I want to explain more about why I view this game as an immersive sim. First off, one of the biggest aspects of the game is player freedom. You could go for a stealth and hacking approach with silenced weapons and a netrunner build, you could pick a melee weapon and fully focus your build on that, you would also go guns blazing with perks that improve fire rate and stamina, and even many more. And with update 2.0, the perk tree got a complete overhaul, giving you even more ways to fit your build to your playstyle. Another important aspect is the somewhat open story. There are different dialogue options and decision-making moments that affect the storyline. Mostly it only has short-term consequences, but there are also different endgame scenarios based on choices you made throughout the game. Nowadays, Cyberpunk 2077 is one of the big games known in the community, with having surpassed $750 million in profit and having more copies sold than Witcher 3? The immersive sim genre, after years of declining popularity, is finally experiencing a revival. One of the most important games that add to this is System Shock Remake. But to understand the significance of this remake, we must first revisit the original System Shock, released in 1994. The original game was both innovative and influential. While the developers built on the immersive elements of the previous games, Ultima Underworld 1 and 2, they streamlined their mechanics into a more integrated whole. Nowadays, it's considered one of the defining examples of an immersive sim. It introduced concepts such as player agency, environmental storytelling, and a blend of RPG elements within an action framework, eventually being an inspiration for future classics like Deus Ex and BioShock. There is actually a trend going on since a few years of remaking, rebooting, and remastering older games. These type of games appeal to both mature gamers and newcomers, so it gains a bigger audience, which in turn leads to more profit. But getting back to System Shock Remake, the first thing you notice is its graphical overhaul. The pixelated graphics and rudimentary textures of the original game are replaced by improved resolutions, enhanced textures and dynamic lighting, while retaining the original feeling of the game. And it's not only the world that is improved, the HUD elements are more clear and have a more modern feeling. Cinematic cutscenes are not 10 frames per second anymore and are now rendered in-engine for a more simultaneous look with the game itself. The remake also introduces several key improvements to the gameplay that enhance the overall experience. The original game's controls, which could feel clunky and unintuitive by today's standards, have been revamped to offer smoother and more responsive handling. For example, picking up an item required you to switch from free look to mouse control, so that you could drag and drop the item into your inventory. The remake modernizes this, by just allowing you to look at an item and picking it up with a single button click, which is then automatically added to the newer inventory system. Where you previously just had a list of items, you now have a grid similar to some survival games, like the Resident Evil 4 remake. The sound design also received a significant upgrade. While higher quality audio is one part of this, the main change is the complete shift in tone. It's not almost childish sounding soundtracks anymore. It now creates a more horror-orientated ambience. The game strikes a perfect balance by preserving the narrative depth, environmental storytelling and interesting level design that made System Shock what it is today. Community, players and critics alike therefore reacted mostly positive on the remake, with very positive reviews on Steam. Another recently released immersive sim is Shadows of Doubt. Well, it's an early access, but still. This game stands out with its unique blend of detective work and sandbox elements. You're being placed in the shoes of a private detective, navigating a dystopian and procedurally generated city, based in an alternate history in 1979. With this comes gathering clues, interrogating suspects, and solving complex cases. A key aspect is therefore puzzle solving. You have to analyze crime scenes, decode hidden messages, and then piece this information together to solve it. The puzzles are designed to be challenging, yet rewarding, and take place in an earlier mentioned procedurally generated city, which come in different sizes. There's even a city editor, where you can further customize a generated city. Really nice. The semi-open world environment gives you the freedom to explore. You can break into buildings and safes by picking locks and question people for answers, for example. There are also dynamic weather events that not only bring visual changes but also status effects to the player. And because of all this random generation, each playthrough is different. NPCs have daily routines, complete with specific habits and schedules. They go about their lives, interacting with the environment and other characters, in ways that make the city feel alive. A somewhat similar game that has this that I can think of is Cyberpunk 2077. But this is not just for show, some NPCs give away intentional clues this way. And that brings me to player agency. There's not one correct way to solve a case. Whether you prefer to break into buildings stealthily to gather evidence, interrogate suspects openly, or use a mix of strategies, the game doesn't limit you. This creativity encourages experimentation and different thinking, which is a core principle of immersive sims. And with this comes unpredictability. A seemingly minor decision, such as choosing when to confront a suspect or how to gather evidence, can ripple through the game's ecosystem, creating unforeseen consequences and challenges. This game is really a product of its own, and the art style and gameplay mechanics really make this game stand out in the immersive sim genre. The mix of genres, sandbox, detective, immersive sim and stealth is never really seen before. The community's reaction, even in early access, is very positive. I came across reviews like, "Best game I've played in years, endlessly satisfying, an excellent game with enormous potential." But most people also mention a load of bugs, which is understandable for an early access game. Moving from the streets of Shadows of Doubt to the underground research facility of Abiotic Factor. At the beginning of the game you can choose your job, which has an effect on certain attributes of your character. Next you can also choose some traits, which have the same effect. The setting is similar to Half-Life, with sci-fi environments and supernatural creatures to defeat. The atmospheric design is pretty good in my opinion, with moody lighting, ambient sounds and well thought out level design. There are also different portal worlds beside just the facility, like Far Garden, an alien planet, or Flathill, a misty town. You can play the game solo, but the focus lies more towards co-op, where you have to work together to craft items and manage your inventories. There is a loose story told about the company Gate, which operates a global network of secretive research laboratories, but it's mostly just playing the game and having fun. Even though the game is more of a survival crafting experience, I still think it has enough elements to be considered an immersive sim. One of the elements are the tools and technologies available to you. These range from actual tools, like the screwdriver and duct tape, to items that provide light and power, also items to defend your base, and many more. Objects, such as terminals and toolboxes, can be interacted with. Not only can you pick them up, deploy them from your inventory and destroy them, you can also interact with some items in certain ways. There are even vehicles to drive. And since this is a survival game, there are enemies to fight. You can collect and craft weapons of your choice, with different ammunition. The crafting aspect is a nice twist to the genre, and it's pretty robust. Most of the items I mentioned earlier can be crafted and customized, allowing for a variety of approaches to problem solving in general. There are shields and throwables to defend yourself. There's so much to talk about this game, it's nuts. There are also elements like hacking into security systems and stealthily bypassing enemies, all key principles often seen in immersive sims. While Abiotic Factor might not have a deeply complex story, it excels in blending elements from various genres to create a unique gameplay experience. It combines the core aspects of immersive sims, player agency, environmental interaction and progressive gameplay, with features from RPGs and survival games. You can level up your character, engage in combat and explore beautiful environments, all while enjoying the freedom to approach situations in multiple ways. Now, there are also some immersive sims that haven't released yet, but do already have a presence in the genre. Let's start with the highly anticipated reboot of Perfect Dark. The original game left a lasting impression when it was released in 2000. Developed by Rare for the Nintendo 64, it was a spiritual successor to the legendary GoldenEye 007, and pushed the limits of what first-person shooters could achieve at the time. With its cutting-edge graphics, complex level design, and a story of science fiction and espionage, Perfect Dark quickly became a classic. Not only the spy team's storyline was unique, but also its advanced AI, which was remarkably sophisticated for its time. Enemies displayed a range of behaviors, from taking cover and coordinating attacks to reacting dynamically to the player's actions, a beginning aspect of an immersive sim. While there isn't yet much information out on the reboot, with only an announced trailer and a gameplay review, I can give you the details that are out. Perfect Dark is a first-person secret agent thriller in a near-future world. With a blessing of the original Perfect Dark studio, they have pulled inspiration from elements of the first two games, but crafted an entirely new story and universe around them. And with today's graphics, we can expect an amazing realistic game that perfectly captures the futuristic atmosphere. The trailer showcases current day environments, but with futuristic elements added. The graphics look amazing, with dynamic lighting, ray tracing and 4K textures. The advanced physics engine of Unreal Engine 5 could also bring a new level of interactivity and realism, allowing for destructible environments and more nuanced character movements. We can also speculate that the AI could be quite advanced, creating opponents that learn from the player's tactics, react more naturally to changing circumstances, and provide a more challenging and engaging experience. At the widest level, Perfect Dark will be a single player experience, with a set of missions, but with choices offered in how you complete those missions. Looking at the trailer, it's clear that traversal and gadgets are a huge part of this. We see new parkour abilities used throughout, both for movement and combat. The developer said that the focus was on creating an intuitive movement system, which will let players find interesting ways to tackle their objectives. Add to that a combat system that allows for both melee and gunplay, stealth mechanics and liberal use of gadgets, and Perfect Dark is a game that will present players with an objective, but let them figure out how they want to achieve it. The studio doesn't want this to feel like any one genre. It takes in elements of first-person shooters, immersive sims and stealth action, but blends them into a seamless whole. The goal is to offer a true secret agent fantasy, and letting you use your various tools and abilities in the way you want is key to this. The main character is Joanna Dark, an agent for Datadyne, with a deep personal connection to what's happening to her world. In the trailer, she is sent into Cairo to find and apprehend Daniel Carrington, and we see her enter a district called Garden City. The setting was chosen to offer a counterpoint to other secret agent stories and media at large. Ancient Egypt and modern Egypt have been seen by many, but a near-future take on the country is truly something new. This near-future world has been impacted by what's known as the Cascade, in which the planet has suffered from a series of environmental disasters, rendering entire regions inhospitable to human life. In the wake of the disaster, a hypercorporation known as Cormantis steps in to create a solution known as the Gen Network and deploys it in Cairo, restoring ecological balance and creating a freshly walled city insulated from the hostile environment outside, to become a center for technological innovation. In its wake, other hypercorporations step in to continue that regeneration, but as you might expect, not all is as it seems, and their motives may be less altruistic than they appear. Let's dive into another highly anticipated title, Judas. This game has captured the attention by building on BioShock with narrative Legos, as said by one of its developers, Ken Levine. Alright, but what does that mean? Let's start right where the game does, with you being reprinted. You play as Judas, a hacker and self-taught engineer who is part of a multi-generational trip from Earth to a new planet called Proxima Centauri, aboard a colony ship called the Mayflower. The capital M mission is to continue the human race after departing Earth due to a bacterial plague. Also, on board the ship, you're not particularly well liked. You see, it turns out that things went seriously sideways, and it's all your fault. Now that you live again, you've got the 3 holographic heads of the ship to contend with. Tom, the ship's head of security who wants to protect the mission at all costs. Dr. Okeke, the ship's medical officer who embraces a robots are the way forward mindset and becomes Nefertiti after abandoning all of her biological self. And Hope, the ship's counselor. To get back to the narrative Legos, this means the dynamic is all about the choices you make during gameplay. Who will you help out? And as a result, who will you piss off? And what about combat? It will look familiar to BioShock veterans, though to be clear, Judas is its own game and in no way connected to any BioShock game. You've got a gun in your right hand, and abilities in your left hand. Pistols and shotguns are 2 of your most prominent tools of the trade, at least of your right hand. You fight fixed robots who use to tidy up the ship by shooting them or zapping them with fire, one of the powers you can acquire for your left hand. Even better if there happens to be oil on the ground that you can burn, thus taking out multiple enemies at a time. See, just like BioShock. Like I said, Judas is a hacker, so you can hack lots of things around the ship, which very much includes your robotic attackers. You can make them do any number of things, from turning passive to aggressive to sheer chaos. But I'm talking immersive sims here, so what makes this game one? Again, it's player agency. Whether you prefer a stealthy approach or a more direct style, the game aims to accommodate a variety of playstyles. The developers also mentioned something about a roguelike loop, so that's interesting. Additionally, puzzle solving elements are anticipated to also play a role. Nothing mind-breaking, but still adds some variety. The last thing I shortly want to mention are the graphics. I really like how the art style combines realistic textures with a distinctive aesthetic. This creates an atmosphere that really draws you in and makes sure that the game doesn't look outdated in a few years. The developer's previous successes have set high expectations, and the buzz generated by each new announcement and trailer has only fueled the anticipation. I'm definitely picking this one up at launch. The next upcoming title simply looks amazing. Nivalis takes place in a greatly detailed cyberpunk city, a metropolis where advanced technology intertwines with the realities of urban life. Large skyscrapers tower over narrow, lively streets filled with NPCs. It looks like a place I could lose hours in, just walking around. The studio, Iron Lens, said, "It's the kind of place you can just cruise aimlessly, letting the sights and sounds wash over you." NPCs each have their own daily routine and tasks, which makes the city feel immersive. You can also interact with a lot of them, which will give you side quests. All the little details around the place add to the environmental storytelling. This is a game where the world itself tells a story, inviting you to explore and discover. In the trailer can be seen the different districts, from the center of the city to downtown slums and quiet docks to throw your fishline out. Adding to the immersion are different mechanics. The dynamic day-night cycle and weather effects play an important role in this. I couldn't find information if the different weather effects also have an impact on other mechanics, but it sure does look cool. Besides, you can control most of the vehicles seen, like a boat, the metro and possibly flying cars. What sets Nivalis apart from many other games in the immersive sim genre is its approach to storytelling. Rather than following a predetermined narrative, this game gives you the freedom to create your own story. There is a main questline and various side quests, but you can choose to follow it or not. You can manage businesses, decorate your home, sell and trade items, or just freely explore the city. For example, you have your own greenhouse where you can grow different vegetables and meat, but the immersion is added through multiple systems, like different modules and upgrades to add to your greenhouse, and even manage the temperature, humidity and light inside. This game is made to lose yourself in and forget your worries. And a side note, the map view looks really unique. Normally it's presented in a top-down 3D view, but the studio chose to go for a sideways 2D view. The last upcoming game I'm going to talk about is Gloomwood, a game that expertly uses inspiration from classic immersive sims and survival horror titles from the late 90s and early 2000s. If you found yourself craving for the atmospheric tension of Thief, the depth of System Shock, or the sinister horror of Resident Evil, Gloomwood promises to be a nostalgic yet refreshing game. The retro influences are not just visual, they shine through in every aspect of the design, from the moody lighting and low poly aesthetics to the old-fashioned world building and narrative structure. And I hear you thinking, Gloomwood is already released, right? Well, you're sort of right, but also wrong. Yes, you can already buy and play Gloomwood, but it's still in early access and not officially released, so that's why I'm counting it in the upcoming game section. The game blends a first-person shooter with stealth mechanics. As most stealth games, you can go running gunning, but it isn't encouraged. Sneaking past enemies, placing traps and killing them from behind are all better approaches. There are also some movement mechanics that add to the immersion, like the ability to climb onto ledges, crouch under objects to hide and peek around corners. Each level has many different possibilities, where patience and thoughtfulness are often more rewarding than brute force. The game also incorporates survival horror elements. Resource management is crucial. Ammunition, health items and other supplies are scarce, and since there's no HUD, you don't have this information readily available at a glance. You have to open your inventory and be vulnerable while doing so, which, by the way, looks similar to Resident Evil 4 Remake. This blend of survival horror and immersive sim gameplay creates an experience that is both nerve-wracking and deeply engaging, and the sound design only adds to this. The environmental interactivity is another important element for the immersion. For example, you can pick up a lot of objects, such as keys to open locked doors, weapons from fallen enemies, and bottles to throw near enemies to distract them. Also, light sources like lanterns and candles can be shot to eliminate the light. This again shows the freedom you have in handling these levels. Lastly, Gloomwood stands out due to its indie appeal. Because it's developed by two passionate developers, it allows for more creative freedom, which resonates with players. But why now? Why are more immersive sims coming out lately? Well, this can be largely attributed to the growing demand among players for games with depth and replayability. As multiplayer games and live service models have become increasingly dominating, the other part of the gaming community has been hoping for more single-player titles, with a deep story, meaningful choices and a kind of gameplay that rewards creativity and exploration, not the kind that just puts random stuff in a game. Fortnite. Immersive sims provide exactly that. A genre that I think kind of made people appreciate replayability more are roguelikes. This genre was rising up since a few years ago, with titles like Hades and Slay the Spire. Another important factor is the success of remakes and remasters of classic titles. The System Shock remake, for example, has not only introduced a new generation of players to one of the genre's foundational games, but also gave longtime fans the chance to re-experience it in a new way. While there are also companies that just make lazy and bad remasters, this is a good way to introduce a new generation to the older immersive sims. Previous remakes have proven that there is still a decent market for them, encouraging both AAA developers and indie studios to explore with the genre. Some interesting indie titles to put on your radar are Peripetia, if I pronounce that correctly, Core Decay, Corpus Edex and Fallen Aces, which are all really distinct from mainstream releases. This interest is also a reflection of the broader trends in the gaming industry, where there's a growing appreciation for games that prioritize quality over quantity, and the demand for immersive sims is only likely to increase. Modern iterations of the genre also blend elements from other popular genres. Unlike their earlier counterparts, today's immersive sims often incorporate RPG mechanics, survival horror elements, or sandbox-style gameplay. This approach not only makes these games more interesting for people with different interests, but also makes these games just better in general. Players who might not traditionally be interested in immersive sims are now getting introduced to the genre. And the last reason is that the modding scene has recently been thriving. More people are expressing their creativity, from overhauling graphics, creating new content, to even overhauling entire gameplay systems, often long after a game's official support has ended. For immersive sims, which thrive on player freedom, this support is especially meaningful. When a classic immersive sim receives a substantial mod or popular overhaul, it often gathers attention from people who may have missed the original release, or those looking to experience the game in a fresh way. Look at Fallout London, for example. While technically isn't really an immersive sim, it did gain a lot of interest. This also has a compounding effect. If more people are creating new content, it inspires even more people. Whether you're a longtime fan or a curious newcomer, now is the perfect time to play immersive sims.